My guest today is a fantastic concert and event photographer. She has photographed artists from many diverse genres of music. She has also captured recent political events as well as the current state of the world. Please welcome to the Eclectic Arts virtual studio, Lisa Hagen Glynn. Lisa.
Hello, Mark.
Hi, how are you?
Doing great, thanks. Thanks so much for having me today.
Yeah, thank you for joining me. Again, I'm so glad that you could be a part of this show and this tour and this particular day, and also that we get to kind of talk some shop about photography and also some things, beyond photography today for the next 28 minutes. So thank you so much for joining me. And as we were saying pre-show, especially here, as you know, living here in the Washington State area, that we were kind of front and center when the pandemic first hit because of the cases that were here, and then it started to spread down the West Coast and went east and everything else. So during this course of time from the end of February or March to, well, now into August, how have you been in terms of watching the events go away as a photographer and watching, all these kind of opportunities kind of go? How have you managed to cope during this time?
Yes, it's been a really strange time for sure. I think, like everyone else, just doing the best that I can and that we can. At the same time, there's a huge sense of loss related to all of this. And it extends to the whole world, obviously. And events are, for me, a big part of that, to have so suddenly lost something that feels so important. And at the same time, I feel very lucky to, have food, to be employed, to try to continue art, even and maybe especially during these times, to try to bring some beauty or a message to people who can't leave their homes right now.
Yeah, no, it's very well spoken, and I definitely relate to that too. That we're always trying to find the things that you should be grateful for during a really difficult time. And for myself, there's definitely things I'm grateful for. The fact that I'm healthy, that I have a roof over my head, that I'm a part of this amazing virtual tour with Alice, and getting to talk to guests like yourselves. That it's not lost on me that some people have it so much worse and hard right now that I have to kind of make sure that I'm looking at, that I'm not losing my perspective on things, because it can get to that point of like, man, I've lost this, and this. It's like, well, yes, and that's not to make small of that, but it's like this person over here, or this family over here is dealing with, maybe 20 of those things. It's like, oh yeah, it's a nice day. It's Sunday. It's sunny out here in Seattle. So I can kind of like, yeah, I can smile and just kind of enjoy it for what it is. And I wanted to kind of, since we're still kind of on this topic, I know I saw some photos that you had done, and maybe it was just something you did personally while the protests were going on here, and the Black Lives Matter movement, and you had posted some pictures. So can you kind of just give me your thoughts about what it was like actually being out there for different days when you're shooting some of these things?
Definitely, yes. And for those who might not be located in Seattle, we've had months of protests now, following the unfortunate killing of George Floyd and others around the U.S. And I've been out as much as I possibly can. I know we've been on quarantine for part of this time, and trying to be very careful to mask up and socially distance to be able to be present and to witness the events that are happening here. And I'll just say it's such a powerful experience to hear others protest and to be heard, sometimes struggling to be heard, and just to watch people awaken who might not have been aware of the situation before, I think is just a really special experience for me as a photographer. And so I make it out as much as I can. As you probably know, it's gotten a lot less safe for journalists lately too. I've certainly talked to friends who are buying protective gear just to do their jobs. And obviously, our Black communities and people of color overall have witnessed these events for a very long time. But it's a little new, I think, for journalists to be under attack in this way. So, trying to help use my voice, use my lens to extend the messages that are coming from the protests the best I can. That feels like a really important thing right now.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. Just hearing what you just said, and also seeing the imagery that came from being out there. And so, for yourself personally, was there a time when you felt things are getting pretty hairy, and that you need to kind of step back from whatever protest you happen to be capturing?
I've been pretty lucky, and I will say I stood out the one a couple of weeks ago after seeing that it had turned violent and feeling like that might not be my best way to be helpful in that moment. I have a whole lot of respect for those who were there and who chose to be there despite the danger, including all the protesters. But yes, I've been fortunate to be fairly safe, and I think a lot of that is who I am as a white woman. Also, that's a privilege that I have.
Wow, it's no, it's really. I appreciate your take on this, and the other guests that I've had on the show. Sometimes we've been talking about these matters. We kind of mentioned that pre-show about the Black Lives Matter movement, privilege, people trying to learn, people trying to listen, and it's just like you said about an awakening for certain people of what's been going on for decades for some marginalized populations, and just kind of seeing this whole. It feels like if I had to put it in a picture of like the ground kind of cracking open and things just starting to come out of it instead of it just kind of going right back to being flat again. It's like, well, no, those cracks are still there. They're getting bigger. They're going in different directions, and it's been a long time coming, really, that these things happen. So it's just off the top of my head. I was curious too, like when the Chop Chaz area up on Capitol Hill. Did you get a chance to excuse me, photograph anything up there during that time?
Definitely, yes. So in the slides that I gave you, you'll see I think one image from that particular protest. But I was there several times during the couple of weeks of Chaz and then Chop. The artwork was amazing, and again, really powerful. Just to be there and to witness, and to try to document the best that I could, from an appropriate place too, not to co-opt or be in the way of others who should be there.
Okay, no, that's amazing. Yeah, I can't wait for everybody out there to see the slideshow that Lisa put together of just the vast array of her work, from the concerts to the events, and something else that since we're on this topic, I would love to hear. I know you've shot some of the political rallies and events. So, like when Bernie Sanders was here at the time, and I know some other ones prior to that, you've also were able to photograph. Can you kind of speak to some of the different political events you've photographed?
Definitely, yes. So I was very fortunate to be able to photograph and also write about the Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders rallies when those were in town, and that was a little bit new for me. Actually, I hadn't covered that particular aspect of politics, and the energy in those rooms was really overwhelming. To see so many people coming together for a cause and feeling really strongly about it. It was also just really a cool experience to be up close and personal. We do that at concerts, and it's different to see our politicians, our leaders up close. So that was a neat experience for me.
Yeah, and you bring up an interesting point of so how was it different shooting the political events? So, like for instance, I would assume there's more security based on how close you can get to the candidates, or is there not? Like you kind of have free reign about a certain area that you can shoot from.
They were pretty particular about the area and kind of let us in and out of essentially a pit area. But I will say the security was a lot like many of the shows that we go to, where you need to show credentials. You pick up a badge, and they have a lot of control over your participation in the event appropriately. I think obviously that's a situation where things could get kind of hairy. So they're trying to keep everybody safe, just like at a concert.
Okay, and did you like let's say in either one of those candidates teams, do they have any particular things that they're looking for, like after you've done the images, or can you just turn them over to who you're working for and they can publish what they want to publish, or they're like, no, we want to see these things before they get out to the public?
No, they didn't have any specifications at all,
Hmm.
at least for the rallies that I covered. I sent them off to my editor at Backbeat Seattle, and from there we ran both stores pretty quickly thereafter.
Okay, that's awesome. And something else I've talked with most of the photographers around here that, well, not just around here, probably anyone that does photography for concerts or events, that um, very few, if not any, can just get away with being a photographer. They usually have to write. If it's writing a review, writing a piece, an article, the journalism aspect. Is that the same case for yourself? And do you like doing the writing?
That's a great question. I will say I like the photography just a little bit more, but I've been a writer for a long time as well. Uh, as someone who's been in academia, part of my career, writing is pretty familiar to me. I've always done writing in some form, academically, research-wise, and so forth. But taking on the concerts was a little bit new for me. I'm actually somewhat newer to pop and rock music than I am to jazz, for example. So writing about bands, researching bands, preparing for interviews, all of that has been a little bit new and very exciting. It's a chance to apply skills in a new way. And I always learn something about the band when I do the research and when I write the piece. So that's actually become pretty enjoyable.
Okay, that's great. I know for myself that I'm probably just exactly what you said, but just the opposite. That I'm a little bit more into the writing than the photography piece. But and that
Mm-hmm.
only came out of that. I figured that when I first got offered to shoot a show, that well, I've done photography in the past, but nothing like concerts. It was completely a 180 from a model that stands still or does poses or what have you. That's what I was used to doing. To people moving around and then going crazy and backlit and terrible lighting and all this kind of thing. So initially, I was thinking, well, maybe I should partner my writing with a photographer. But then I'm like, no, I kind of like a challenge. So let me try to figure this out. So I started doing the concert photography piece too. So and I've got a long way to go. But it's fun in the process. And I was just curious. You mentioned also like with the rock and pop and the non-jazz genres. Does any interview stand out in terms of someone that you talk to either in person or on the phone or virtually from the rock or pop world that you just happen to enjoy that interview?
Mm. Not from the rock or pop side of things, but I can tell you a little bit about a jazz interview that I
Okay.
did that was really a special experience for me, and that was to meet with Antonio Sanchez, so a
Hmm.
very great jazz drummer. And so he was at Jazz Alley last year here in Seattle, and really appreciated the chance to sit down with him and hear about his take, not just on music and his current work, but also on the state of the world and politics, and his really strong vision for how the world could be a better place. So that was a special experience.
That's awesome. And isn't he the one that did the score for Birdman, the film? Do you know if?
Exactly.
Okay. So the reason I
Yes,
know.
yes, he performed that at. Go ahead.
Oh no, I know he performed it at the Neptune. He did it live.
Yes,
I was there. I was there covering the show,
it was
and
amazing. Amazing.
yes, just the fact that here he was on the corner of the stage, and they're showing the film, and he's doing the score in real time, and it was just like, man. So, but I never got to see him at Jazz Alley, so that's great that you got the chance to talk to him. Yeah, and he's very vocal and very outspoken about his opinions about things on life and on the world. So that makes perfect sense, and I'm a little bit envious that you got to talk to him. So, hey, let's kind of go back a bit. So, let's talk about your background just in general. So, are you from the Northwest? Are you from somewhere else? When did you first start getting interested in photography and perhaps the arts in general?
Sure. So this is a complicated question. I was actually born in Eastern Washington, but my family was military, so we moved around a whole lot
Mm.
throughout my childhood, and I landed back in Washington briefly before then going to New Mexico for graduate school and coming back to Seattle after that. So it's been a bit of a journey, but Seattle feels like home these days. It's certainly where I've spent the most of my life cumulatively.
Okay, and
So you had asked about.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you had asked about how I got into photography,
Mhm.
and I think I took my first photo in about 1984. So it's going back a ways now. I was a kid at the time, and my dad was especially into photography during my childhood, and now my mom is as well. So it's been a cool thing to share as a family. But yeah, I started taking photos young and kind of came back to it time after time in high school and in college. And in about 2012, I started getting more serious about my photography and started shooting more shows casually. I am married to a great bassist, and so I'm very fortunate to have a lot of music in my life. And so that's been a big driver of staying in music photography because I love the music, I love the community, and it's a way that I can give back to that community.
That's wonderful. Now, when you were going through the different phases of photography, and like you mentioned, getting serious in 2012, are you formally trained, or are you self-taught, or a little bit of both?
It's a little bit of both, definitely. Certainly, my father was a big influence in my photography, and I took some photography classes in school, and then went back for a certificate at the UW. So just a brief program there, but a really amazing training and a place to meet people here in the community, people that I've stayed connected with ever since.
Okay, no, that's amazing, and I think this is actually a perfect time if we can have the Alice folks down in Los Angeles run the slideshow of Lisa's work, so everybody out there can get a chance to see what we're talking about right now. Then we're going to come back from that slideshow and continue the interview. So if we could run that, that would be awesome, please. Okay, so it's running right now. So All right, so that was Lisa's wonderful work. Hopefully, you got a chance to take a good look at everything, and if not, maybe you can do the replay and look at it again. Lisa, those shots, you had some amazing close-ups, wide-angle events. I love the ones with the protesting that was going on. And just off the top of your head, I know you can't pick one, but is there one of the shots that you've done over your career that really kind of stands out, or just is something special to you?
Hmm. That's a hard one. There are so many great shows and so many talented artists. I will say that I finally got to see Herbie Hancock. So someone that I really wanted to see live, and got to do that at Miramar Park recently, and that was a really cool experience to be front and center. You know, got his beautiful smile on camera, and he's 80 years old now. So I'm so glad to see him playing live shows and still innovating after as many years in the field as he's been here. It's just really inspiring.
That's amazing that he's 80 now. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, I start thinking about the different aspects of his career that I'm familiar with and how far back it goes, and started doing the math in my head. Like, yeah, oh my goodness. Um, and I'm just kind of curious. So you've covered a lot of jazz events, and so does that mean that you're a jazz fan, used to play jazz yourself, or just have an interest in it?
Definitely all of the above. So I started off playing jazz, starting in middle school, I guess, and that continued through college. That I played music, and at that point got a little bit busy with life, and I actually picked up more photography. So those two sometimes try to occupy the same time and space, but I've managed to combine them recently pretty well, so I'm happy with that. So as I mentioned, I'm married to a bassist, a jazz bassist, and so I just love seeing him play, and I really enjoy the community that we have here in Seattle. It's such a strong and tight knit community. So, during COVID, obviously that's been another of those losses. But it's been also really cool to see people staying together, live streaming, supporting one another, and uh, recording together, doing things like that, even with the pandemic, masked up and as safe as possible. So yeah, that's definitely part of my history. It's something that feels very close for me, and I really appreciate being able to shoot jazz now as well.
Okay, that's amazing that you have all the trifecta. You have the background as a player, as a musician yourself, married to one, and then you cover all these different jazz artists that have come through town in different locations and different venues. And that's, I think, well, at least for me, I think I actually talked with you about this when we first met at Sinead O'Connor, that I don't know too many people who shoot jazz, and that's probably just because I just haven't met them. I'm sure they're out there, but you were the first person that I talked to. I was like, oh, she does, she shoots jazz. And as I mentioned to you pre-show, this is great because we have Alice Underground on doing their set right after our interview, who do gypsy swing jazz. So it's like, oh, this couldn't have worked out better. That Lisa's
Good
got
timing.
this, yeah, this jazz background. It's just I could have just played dumb and like I purposely planned this, but it was just a coincidence that it happened that way. But we were kind of talking a little bit during the break that live events safely are probably not coming back till next year, and we're seeing all these. Alice and Mankind is Obsolete. And a lot of bands were doing things last night to help save our stages. We're seeing a lot of that around the country, a lot of initiatives and live streams and things just to fundraise. Just what do you think are things, not when, but what do you think it's going to look like when live events, at least locally, start to come back out of the woodwork? And what do you think that's going to look like?
I think it's going to be a process, and a very strange and probably sometimes uncomfortable one. At the same time, I think people are, at least in Seattle, really invested in the music community. Seattle wouldn't be what it is without live music. So I hope that our stages will survive. I hope people will support them and support musicians who, of course, are having a really hard time right now staying afloat during the pandemic. But I do think that music will return, and the smaller shows, of course, will be first. I think as a jazz fan, that's a plus. Those tend to be small venues, very intimate. So I'll look forward to that returning. But in terms of large festivals, big venues, I don't know. It's so hard to predict. We have to get the virus under control first.
Yeah, no, agreed. And it's like we just keep hoping that a vaccine comes along, and also that vaccine is effective, because that's going to be another aspect of it. And then once we know that, what does that mean for the big arena shows, the outdoor White River shows, or anything of that size, CenturyLink, that will those be able to actually happen next summer? We don't know. We only can hope that it does, but it's going to be one step at a time for sure. And we've got about 2 minutes. I want to know, like, for those people that are watching out there that consider themselves either an amateur photographer or a budding professional photographer, what kind of advice would you give somebody that wants to do what you do?
I think practice and really stay open to feedback. I know for me, the thing that has helped the most is seeking out opinions and critique from people whose work I admire, people with more experience, with good vision, with beautiful images, and studying the work that they do, asking them to share their time with me. And some have been so gracious about that. And I think having mentors is hugely helpful. So getting that feedback and using it to improve, taking it non-defensively and learning everything that you can, and being a little bit creative, not being afraid to try new things. And it's okay if it doesn't work out the first time.
Oh, that's tremendous advice. It's something that I'm trying to actually do myself, in terms of, and we are very fortunate in this area that I can talk to someone who's been doing it for 20 years, and they're willing to talk to me about what they do, and they're not trying to hide anything, or it's like, well, just figure it out on your own. It's not like that at all. It's been really very open, very welcoming and supportive. And it teaches me that when somebody will eventually maybe ask me about something, or maybe it's just about writing or doing interviews, then I want to be open and talk with them and says, hey, this is what I can pass on to you. If you're trying to do this, I'm more than willing to help. And that's how we kind of pay it back and pay it forward to everybody in this area. So Lisa, thank you so much for taking the time today, this afternoon, this evening, this morning, wherever people are watching this from. I so enjoyed talking and chatting and getting to know you better. And I hope you stay safe, and that eventually I will see you at a show somewhere down the line doing what we love to do.
Thank you so much, Mark. And thanks to Alice as well.
All right. Have a good day and good weekend. And again, take care.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.